The numbers alone were enough to raise eyebrows, but once the official paperwork was examined, the picture became far more revealing. This wasn't based on rumors, anonymous insiders, or speculation from royal commentators. It came directly from the Archewell Foundation's own IRS Form 990 for the 2024 fiscal year, a legally required public filing released by the organization itself. The figures tell a striking story. The foundation reported bringing in just $2.59 million while spending $5.11 million during the same period. In other words, expenses exceeded incoming revenue by more than double. But perhaps the most remarkable detail wasn't the spending, it was where the money came from. According to the filing, $2 million of the foundation's total contributions arrived from a single donor. That means roughly 77% of all the money raised in 2024 came from one source. For an organization presenting itself as a broad philanthropic platform, that level of reliance on one contribution immediately raises questions, not necessarily about legality, but about long-term sustainability. So how did the foundation finish the year without appearing to be in financial distress? The answer wasn't found in new fundraising. It was found in money that had already been sitting in reserve. The filing shows that Archewell still held approximately $8.3 million in net assets carried over from previous years. Those reserves allowed the organization to continue operating despite spending far beyond what it raised during 2024, and that's where the timeline becomes especially interesting. Much of that financial cushion dates back to 2021, the same period when Prince Harry and Meghan's high-profile interview with Oprah Winfrey dominated headlines around the world. Years later, those reserves appear to be absorbing annual operating shortfalls measured in the millions. While television panels and online commentators have recently debated whether the Sussexes are facing financial pressure, many overlook the fact that these filings have been publicly available all along. Independent watchdog CharityWatch reviewed the documents in detail and published its analysis on March 24, 2026. What it found became one of the most discussed aspects of the filing, not because it proved wrongdoing, but because it highlighted financial trends that many observers had never examined closely. And those questions have become even more relevant given what lies just ahead. In a matter of days, attention is expected to shift toward the legal proceedings scheduled for July 29 and 30, when a hearing is set to address Prince Harry's individual liability in litigation that has reportedly generated tens of millions of dollars in legal costs. Some reports have estimated documented exposure reaching more than $22 million, while noting that any ultimate liability depends entirely on the court's decisions. At the same time, other pressures have continued to fuel public discussion. Royal author Tom Bower has argued publicly that the Sussexes face growing financial challenges, pointing to declining income streams following the end of major commercial partnerships. Those observations remain his assessment, but when viewed alongside the foundation's published financial filing, they have added another layer to an already intense debate. The distinction is important. The household finances discussed by commentators and the Archewell Foundation are legally separate entities. One does not simply fund the other. Yet both have increasingly become part of the wider conversation surrounding Harry and Meghan's future. Another development also caught attention. CharityWatch stated that it requested Archewell's independently audited financial statements, the type of supporting documentation many organizations of similar size routinely provide. According to the watchdog, it did not receive the requested material. As a result, CharityWatch said it was unable to assign the foundation a formal rating, not because it reached a negative conclusion, but because it lacked sufficient documentation to complete its evaluation. That alone became a story, not because it established misconduct, but because unanswered requests naturally invite more scrutiny. To understand why these numbers matter, it's important to understand what an IRS Form 990 actually represents. This isn't a leaked spreadsheet or unofficial estimate. It's the annual financial return that most tax-exempt organizations in the United States are legally required to file with the Internal Revenue Service. The document is signed, submitted under legal requirements, and made available to the public. According to the 2024 filing, Archewell reported total revenue of $2.59 million, expenses of $5.11 million, assets of roughly $10, $2 million, and liabilities of approximately $1.91 million. Those figures, standing side by side, reveal that spending substantially exceeded incoming revenue during the fiscal year. CharityWatch's analysis highlighted another key point. Of the $2.59 million raised, $2 million came from one donor. And despite spending more than twice its annual revenue, the foundation still ended the year with approximately $8.3 million in net assets because of reserves accumulated during earlier years. Which leads to the question that changes the entire conversation. If those reserves made the difference between surplus and deficit, where did they originally come from? The answer reaches back several years, and that is where the story takes an even more unexpected turn. If the 2024 filing explains how the foundation continues to operate, the next question is even more revealing. Where did those reserves actually come from? The answer doesn't stretch across a decade of steady fundraising. It points almost entirely to one extraordinary year. In 2021, as the Oprah Winfrey interview captured global attention, Archewell experienced its strongest fundraising period to date. The interview dominated international headlines, attracted an enormous television audience, and generated intense public interest in Prince Harry and Meghan. Financial records from that year reflected the impact. The foundation reported receiving roughly $9 million in revenue, its highest total since its creation. According to CharityWatch Executive Director Lori Styron, the available reporting suggested something significant about the nature of those donations. Rather than depending on a handful of wealthy contributors, much of the support appeared to come from numerous smaller donations made by members of the public. That distinction matters. Broad public participation tells a very different story from reliance on a few major benefactors, but what happened afterward was dramatic. By the following year, the fundraising landscape had changed almost completely. Reporting on the 2022 tax filings described an estimated $11 million drop in donations compared with the previous period. Styron also noted that nearly all of the foundation's donations that year appeared to originate from only two contributors. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One year reflected widespread public participation. The next appeared to depend almost entirely on a tiny group of major donors. Whether viewed as changing public interest, shifting fundraising strategy, or something else entirely, the financial pattern had clearly evolved, and it didn't stop there. The same trend continued into 2023. Reports reviewing that year's tax records indicated that the foundation raised approximately $5.3 million, yet around $5 million of that total reportedly came from one individual donor, while the remaining contributions were divided among only a handful of others. Then came the 2024 filing. Revenue fell again, landing at $2.59 million. Once again, $2 million reportedly came from a single donor. Viewed across 4 consecutive years, a pattern begins to emerge. A surge of broad public support in 2021, a sharp shift toward major individual contributors in 2022, continued dependence on one or two significant donors in 2023, and by 2024, another year in which one contribution represented the overwhelming majority of new funding. The reserves keeping the foundation financially stable today appear to trace back to that remarkable fundraising moment several years earlier. But another issue surfaced during CharityWatch's review, one that had nothing to do with donation totals. It centered on transparency. CharityWatch, an independent organization that evaluates nonprofit performance, normally assigns ratings based on financial efficiency, accountability, governance, and public disclosure. When it reviewed Archewell Philanthropies for fiscal year 2024, however, it did not issue its usual letter grade. Instead, the organization displayed a question mark. That wasn't intended as a failing grade. It reflected something different. According to CharityWatch's published explanation, it could not complete its evaluation because the foundation did not provide the independently audited financial statements it had requested, and those documents were also not available on the organization's website. Understanding the distinction is important. An IRS Form 9990 is a legally required public filing prepared by the nonprofit itself. An independent audit, on the other hand, is conducted by outside accountants following established accounting standards. The two documents serve different purposes. The Form 990 reports the organization's financial information. An audit provides independent verification of those figures. Without access to the audit, CharityWatch said it could not carry out the level of review required for a formal rating. Its explanation emphasized that IRS filings themselves are not independently audited under generally accepted auditing standards. Another detail within the filing also drew attention. According to CharityWatch's analysis, more than 47% of the organization's reported program spending appeared under a broad category labeled Other Fees for Service. Nearly half of reported program expenses were grouped within that single description. The filing itself did not provide a detailed breakdown of those costs, and because the requested audit was unavailable, CharityWatch said it was unable to examine that category further. By this stage, two separate questions had emerged. One involved where the money was coming from. The other involved how portions of it were being reported. Neither issue on its own proves misconduct, but together they have fueled increasing public interest in the foundation's financial operations. Yet even that may not be the biggest challenge now facing the Sussexes, because while analysts continue examining the foundation's financial filings, another story has been unfolding on an entirely different front. This one doesn't involve charitable donations, it involves the courts. And unlike speculation surrounding future income or donor support, legal proceedings follow their own timetable. That's why many royal observers have begun looking at these two developments side by side. One concerns a non-profit drawing on reserves accumulated years ago. The other concerns legal proceedings that could carry significant financial consequences depending on the court's eventual decisions. Before those two stories intersect, however, there's one final reason this filing has attracted so much attention. Unlike commentary from television panels or anonymous royal sources, these numbers come from official documents submitted under legal requirements. Commentators may disagree over what the figures mean. Authors may offer competing interpretations. Public figures may challenge one another's conclusions, but the filing itself exists as a matter of public record, and that makes the debate surrounding it fundamentally different. Still, the most consequential comparison has yet to come. At this stage, the discussion moves beyond opinion and into documentation. Commentators can debate interpretations. Authors can present theories. Royal watchers can disagree over what the future holds, but an IRS Form 990 is something entirely different. It is a signed legal filing submitted to the Internal Revenue Service, published by the organization itself, archived in public databases, and available for anyone willing to examine the numbers. That is why this particular conversation has attracted so much attention. The figures aren't coming from unnamed sources or tabloid headlines. They come directly from Archewell's own financial disclosures. The filing reports approximately $2.59 million in revenue against $5.11 million in expenses. It shows that roughly 77% of all contributions came from one donor. CharityWatch also noted that more than 47% of reported program spending appeared under a broad category described as other fees for service. And because the independent audited financial statements it requested were not made available, the organization said it could not complete its standard evaluation. Those are the published facts contained within the public record. The debate begins only when people ask what those figures actually mean. Then the picture becomes even more complex, because the foundation is only one part of a much larger financial landscape. Separate from Archewell are the personal finances associated with Prince Harry and Meghan's household. Those are distinct legal entities. One does not simply pay the other's bills, yet both have increasingly become subjects of public discussion at the same time. Royal author Tom Bower has argued that maintaining the Sussexes' lifestyle, including security, staffing, and property, requires several $1 million annually. He has also suggested that income from earlier commercial agreements has become less predictable following the conclusion of major entertainment partnerships. Those remain his published assessments. The foundation's financial filing, meanwhile, presents an entirely separate set of numbers. Viewed independently, each tells its own story. Viewed together, they have prompted observers to ask whether multiple financial pressures are developing simultaneously. And then there is the legal timetable. Attention has increasingly focused on the upcoming court proceedings scheduled for July 29 and 30, where costs connected to Prince Harry's litigation are expected to be addressed. Public reporting has suggested that the broader case has generated extremely substantial legal expenses, while legal commentators have noted that the court's ultimate decision regarding costs remains to be determined. The final outcome will depend entirely on judicial rulings. Another report that attracted attention involved claims that Prince Harry had approached Sir Elton John while discussing funding connected with the Invictus Games. Those reports have circulated widely, although the details surrounding any private conversations have not been independently confirmed by the individuals involved. Taken individually, each of these developments may appear unrelated, but together, they create the broader backdrop against which the foundation's financial filings are now being examined. Looking only at documented information, several points stand out. The foundation spent substantially more than it raised during 2024. Its remaining financial strength reflects reserves accumulated several years earlier. Its fundraising has become increasingly concentrated among a very small number of major donors. And an independent charity watchdog stated that it could not complete its rating because requested audited financial statements were unavailable. None of those facts by themselves establish wrongdoing. The filing does not accuse anyone of misconduct. No official body has alleged fraud. The numbers simply describe the organization's financial position during the reporting period. Sometimes arithmetic alone becomes the story. While financial questions have dominated recent headlines, another trend has been unfolding in public opinion. Polling in the United Kingdom continues to show strong support for several senior members of the royal family. Recent survey results place Princess Catherine, Prince William, Princess Anne, and King Charles among the most positively viewed royals, while Queen Camilla's ratings remained more mixed. Further down the list, Prince Harry's approval ratings have declined considerably compared with the levels he once enjoyed during his years as a working royal. Meghan Markle's reported ratings have also remained significantly lower, according to the same polling. Public opinion can change over time, and individual surveys represent only a snapshot rather than a permanent verdict. Even so, the contrast with earlier years has become another recurring topic among royal commentators. To understand how the current situation developed, it's worth tracing the sequence of events. Archewell was launched in 2020 following Harry and Meghan's departure from official royal duties. In 2021, the Oprah Winfrey interview brought extraordinary worldwide attention, and that same fiscal year became the foundation's strongest fundraising period, with reports indicating broad participation from many smaller public donors. By 2022, donations had fallen sharply, with reporting suggesting that most contributions came from only 2 major donors. In 2023, the pattern continued, with one donor accounting for the overwhelming majority of reported contributions. Then, in May 2024, the California Attorney General's Registry of Charities and Fundraisers issued a notice stating that the foundation was delinquent and temporarily not in good standing. According to Archewell, the issue resulted from a payment that had not been processed, and the matter was resolved shortly afterward, restoring the organization's status. Later financial filings for 2024 showed revenue of $2.59 million, expenses of $5.11 million, and reported that $2 million of the year's contributions came from a single donor. On paper, each event can be viewed independently. When all of the publicly available records are placed in chronological order, 3 themes emerge: not accusations, not conclusions, but documented patterns that have become increasingly difficult for observers to ignore. The first is the financial picture itself. The Archewell Foundation's 2024 IRS Form 990 reports revenue of approximately $2.59 million against expenses of $5.11 million. That left spending exceeding income by roughly $2.5 million during the fiscal year. The foundation remained financially stable because it entered the year with approximately $8.3 million in net assets built up during previous years. Those reserves largely trace back to 2021, when the organization experienced its strongest fundraising period following the global attention surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan's interview with Oprah Winfrey. At the current pace reflected in the filing, those reserves are being drawn down to support ongoing operations. That isn't speculation. It's the arithmetic presented in the foundation's own publicly filed tax return. The second theme is how the fundraising has changed over time. In 2021, reports indicated broad public participation contributed to roughly $9 million in revenue. By 2022, reporting suggested donations had declined sharply, with most funding coming from only 2 major contributors. In 2023, one donor reportedly accounted for approximately $5 million of the $5.3 million raised. The 2024 filing continued that pattern, showing that $2 million of the year's $2.59 million in contributions came from a single donor. Across 4 consecutive reporting years, the fundraising profile shifted dramatically from widespread public giving to heavy reliance on a very small number of substantial contributors. Whether that reflects changing public interest, fundraising strategy, or other factors is open to interpretation. The filings simply document the evolution. The third theme involves transparency. CharityWatch stated that it could not assign a formal rating to Archewell Philanthropies for fiscal year 2024 because it did not receive the independently audited financial statements it had requested, and those statements were not publicly available on the organization's website. The watchdog also noted that a significant portion of reported program spending appeared under a broad category labeled Other Fees for Service, which the filing itself did not further itemize. Without the requested audit, CharityWatch said it was unable to complete the level of review necessary for a standard rating. Those observations formed the basis of its published analysis. At the same time, separate legal proceedings involving Prince Harry continue to draw attention, with a court scheduled to consider issues relating to litigation costs. Whatever financial consequences may ultimately result will depend entirely on the court's rulings. Taken together, these are separate stories unfolding at the same moment. One concerns a non-profit organization operating from previously accumulated reserves. The other concerns ongoing legal matters involving one of its founders. Neither should automatically be interpreted through the lens of the other. What makes this discussion unusual is that it relies not on leaked documents or anonymous sources, but on records that have been publicly available. The Foundation's Form 990 is a legal filing. CharityWatch's analysis is published. The court schedule is public. Those documents form the basis of the conversation. One final point deserves careful clarification. The competitor script asks why the Archewell Foundation did not provide its independently audited financial statements to CharityWatch. Based on the material presented here and the publicly cited CharityWatch analysis, no specific public explanation from the foundation is identified for not providing those documents. CharityWatch reported that it requested the audited financial statements, did not receive them, and therefore could not issue a rating. Unless the foundation has since released an official statement elsewhere, there is no documented, on-the-record reason presented in the cited materials. That distinction matters. It's appropriate to report what the documents show. It's equally important not to speculate about explanations that have not been publicly provided. If future statements or filings address that question, they can be evaluated on their own merits. Until then, the public record says only this. The request was made, the audit was not provided to CharityWatch, and no publicly documented explanation appears in the sources discussed. If you found this breakdown useful and appreciate careful analysis based on public records rather than speculation, let us know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next royal family update.